Section 2. Fact. Nobody in this civilization, including especially the U.S., older than 6 years with a minimum IQ of at least 90, believes in God. And my epigraph is a quote from poet T.S. Eliot. Quote, "The majority of mankind is lazy-minded, incurious, absorbed in vanity, tepid in emotion, and therefore incapable of generating much doubt or much faith." No one believes in God. Not one person in this country, or in all of Western civilization for that matter, over the age of 6, with an IQ of at least 90, really believes in God. I have developed clandestine tests that prove this contention. I have seen how accurate they are by the violent reactions they have produced in the testees when they realize that I have been testing them and monitoring their answers, and have shown them that they don't even know what they mean by the word God in the first place, and certainly don't believe in whatever they think or pretend to believe in. It's all a big plastic act. Nobody in this country believes in God. There is no such thing as God in the Bible Belt. Basement Baptists attending church on Sundays have no God inside of them. Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn or LA or Israel do not believe in Hashem. Muslims in Detroit or Chicago or LA do not believe in God. They may have still possessed a modicum of belief when they initially arrived here, but they have replaced any belief in God that they may once have had with belief in shopping malls, like the rest of us. Some Muslims in New York City or New Jersey may still be stupid enough to partially believe in some concept of God, but of course it will not last. Religion as ornament. People who say they believe in God are complete liars. Anybody who truly believed in God would be living a life like Mother Teresa. For most of these so-called believers, their religion is just an ornament, but also an important social function of publicly practicing belief. People cannot cope with the reality of death the way they could before God died inside of them. Horror of the concept of death, pain and poverty and suffering, and death. See? That's part of the problem. Members of the herd are terrorized by the thought of their eventual and inevitable death, and more by the death of others, family, friends. So they avoid thinking about it to the point of controlling or at least influencing the language of other members of the herd, especially the new presenters and discussers. People cannot even say the word death or dead or died anymore. Instead, they substitute passed away rather than the horror of saying he died. Anything that may trigger self-questioning or self-reflection of any sort is avoided to the point of death. No pun. Spontaneous memorials are more symptoms of terror of the very idea of death in PMA. Ad hoc memorials, spontaneous shrines, grassroots memorials, roadside memorials, memorial walls, public shrines, public tributes, impromptu shrines, makeshift memorials, all symptoms showing that people today have developed a new, far more inadequate relationship with death. They often refuse cognitively to believe that the person has died. They cannot even speak the word death anymore. People don't die anymore, they pass away. They are also more evidence that people no longer believe in God. Substitutes for God and distraction devices. All this bullshit about the Parksville shooting the other day. Better worldism is the last remaining vestige of religion that the American people have to hold on to. Simulated moral outrage and grandstanding covers over their guilt about not believing in anything anymore if they ever did. Substitutes for God. Conspiracy theories function today to provide people with the religious mysteriousness, the experience of the mystical that we used to experience from religious belief, but especially from religious ceremony, from religious ritual. This includes most obviously UFOs, Atlantis, new attempts to create new religions, which in turn turn out to be sick religious cults, and many other phenomena. Secular mysticism, substitutes for religious mysticism. Spengler talks about the move from Protestantism from Catholicism to Protestantism in Central and Western Europe. And he talks about the negative effects that this had on the Western psyche, because they still went to church and worshiped, but the worship became blank and dull, like Puritans in Britain in the days of Oliver Cromwell or the landing at Plymouth Rock. It took all the religious mysticism and mysteriousness out of religion, which without that stuff, it certainly loses its taste. Loss of God guilt or God guilt. has created multiple industries of what I call distraction devices, which are one after effect of Hilarion nihilism above, and which help them to self-medicate for the self-hate they feel and to distract themselves from these feelings. Prayer is nothing but a pose or a form of socializing or both. It never ceases to amaze me how some people possess the unmitigated gall to go into church or synagogue, especially synagogue, and actually pray. They know they are just pretending to pray. Peter O'Toole in the ruling class. Every time I pray, I find that I am just talking to myself. So either there is no God or else I am he. I prefer the latter, personally. The pose of prayer and idiots who talk about their personal relationship with God. Oftentimes, their public profession of faith constitute attempts at self-medicating for identity function. Also, claiming belief helps to temporarily provide relief from the boredom that comes from a life lived in too much safety and comfort. Atheist chic is conformist, the bumblebees of nihilism. Atheism is in fashion, the atheists are in bloom, atheism is now in season. The new herd of atheist Philistines are upon us, Samson. Unbeknownst to them, they actually killed off God decades ago, but finally they are giving the act official recognition. They make fashionable the pose of atheism. In the political arena today, it's libertarianism that is today's fashionable pose. But the important point is not that they don't believe in God. They don't believe in God because they don't believe in anything. They are the bumblebees of nihilism. They don't believe in anything because they aren't strong enough to believe in anything anymore. They aren't strong enough to believe, period. Greeks and Romans thought of the earth as something alive. Jews and their followers think of it as something dead. European civilization has been formed. Modern European civilization, even medieval, has been formed by two conflicting and competing ideological systems, the Judeo-Christian and the Greco-Roman. The Greco-Roman had the genius to produce the science, engineering, and technology that gave us the power to destroy the world. But they were pagans, which means that they thought the earth itself was something living. Therefore, they would never have been capable of doing the damage that we are doing now. It was the Judeo-Christian strain, pun intended, that produced the motivation to use the tools the Greeks and Romans left to us to destroy the planet. This is because Jews, Christians, Muslims, and etc. view the earth not as a living organism, but as something dead. This is because they dream of killing it, because they hate it. Hatred of the world, hatred of the earth, hatred of life, hatred of humanity is the essence of all monotheistic religions. That's why they babble incessantly about love. Religion versus the religious feeling. Religion itself, at least how it's been conceived thus far, is bullshit. But the religious feeling is crucial to our existence. How can we express our religious feeling without giving in to myths we can no longer believe in? Answer, inhumanism. But that's for another presentation. The anonymous God. The Jewish concept of God. Everyone in America today is a victim. We created this atmosphere with Jewish bullshit about the Holocaust. This bullshit seeped down into the groundwater, and every pathetic minority group drank it. Women drank it, initially Jewish women, which is an important point we'll get back to, and suddenly discovered they were victims of patriarchy. Negroes drank it and suddenly decided they deserved reparations for slavery. They also got that nonsense from Jewish groups that were attacking the German nation for reparations for World War II. Of course, being the most narcissistic people in history, we have succeeded in making the entire World War II period be entirely about us, as we do with everything else that isn't ours. Poor people drank it and one morning awakened to the reality that they were being exploited by capitalism. Homosexuals drank it and realized that their behavior was natural and normal, and therefore disapproval from the population at large was a form of discrimination. Even worse, comfortable whites started to discover ways that they were being exploited and oppressed too. Now the field is wide open to everyone. Muslims, Palestinians, Serbo-Croatians, Inuits, Mexicans, Arabs. The problem is when everybody is a victim, you will run out of persecutors. Respect for other people's beliefs, more proof that nobody believes in God. Respect other people's beliefs. If you really believe what you believe in is the truth, then you can never respect other people who believe differently. If they believe differently, then they are in error, and you can only respect other people like yourself who believe like yourself. How can you respect someone who believes falsely? I mean, how can you respect someone for their beliefs when you believe that their beliefs are false? In terms of religion, you can only respect those who possess the truth as you do. People today who believe that they believe, or who want to believe what they believe, they exhibit what may be called act as if belief. People in America today who say they believe are merely acting as if they believe and hoping nobody notices. Pseudo-belief. I have developed tests to prove that people do not believe in God today. They prove to the tester that they do not really believe in what they say they believe. The testee. These are clandestine tests that I use on people without their knowledge. I ask them a series of questions, leading them around by the nose, using my version of Socratic method, until I get them to the point where they suddenly realize they just revealed the truth about their pseudo-belief, that they do not really believe in God. I know these tests are accurate and reliable by the violent reactions I get from people when they realize that their professed beliefs are a total fraud. I've had people shove me violently and try to grab my hair in a rage. I've seen people try to throw punches at me. I've been kicked out of several churches, synagogues, Jewish centers, and other religion venues. Variety of concepts of pseudo-belief. The tradition, Judeo-Christian Muslim monotheism concept of God, tradition as the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful, old white bearded man depicted in Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling. Question: if God told you to kill your daughter, typical answer: God wouldn't do that. Analysis: if you believe the biblical views, God has already done it several times. Another typical answer: how would I know it was God? Analysis: this is epistemological subterfuge and confusion. If you believe in the omnipotent view of God and he wanted you to know with certainty that it was truly God telling you to kill your kid, you would know that it was God with certainty. The fact that they don't understand shows that they have not thought the idea through. But it is everybody in religious worship, but it applies to everybody in religious worship in the Bible. If you have to even ask that question, that is proof that you do not believe in God. The answer of a truly faithful person would go something like, if I was honored that God spoke to me personally and had a task for me, of course I would do whatever he asks. After all, it is God telling me what he wants from me. A true believer would have absolutely no fear of anything, anywhere, anyhow. They could walk off a cliff with a smile on their faces, knowing that if this is what God wants them to do, I have total trust, faith in him, they would say to themselves. Anyone who believes in the traditional concept of the monotheistic God, you would certainly believe that if God wanted to talk to you, and if he wanted you to know with certainty that you were in fact talking to God, he would make you know it. He could plant in your head the knowledge that he is God. What if he told you to torture your daughter for 3 hours before killing her? Shows that God is not that person's priority. He comes second or third after loved ones. But what bullshit. If a person truly believes in God, God would be the absolute only priority in their life. Family would be important, but you would be thinking along the lines of, how does God want me to prioritize my family? Nobody in this country, nobody in this civilization lives their life in any way resembling this. I mean, it's kind of similar to the Middle Ages with monks and nuns. They basically said, this life I live in is forfeit for the better one to come. So they hid themselves away from the world in monasteries and nunneries and refused all of the here and now, all of the pleasures and comforts. Because they said, my belief in God is so strong that I am forfeiting all of the possible enjoyable things about life, the feeling of being alive, which is in itself an enjoyable sensation. They've done away with that because they said, well, the next life will be perfect, the perfect world, the better world. Eric Keller, quote, this is an article by Eric Keller from another book of his, which is an excellent collection of essays called The Disinherited Mind. Oswald Spengler and the Predicament of the Historical Imagination. Excuse me. Quote, the spiritual exhaustion of the age has been the dominant theme of our most discussed writers. Of D.H. Lawrence, Franz Kafka, T.S. Eliot, not to mention the gloomily vigorous Americans, and when they indulge in prophetic visions of the future, in the manner of Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, or even the dying Fabian H.G. Wells, the emerging picture is invariably an elaboration of themes from the decline of the West. In other words, the most sensitive people in our society are great writers, are quasi-consciously seeing everything go to shit, to self-destruct, to fade away, to die away. Nobody in this country believes in God. The very idea is preposterous, even on the part of the most consistent, devoted churchgoer. Americans are so far aloof from actually believing in God, they no longer have a bare minimum image of what a person who does truly believe in God or in gods would look like, or act like, or present like. The feeling of believing in God is a foreign feeling for people in America today. Loss of God, lunacy, and psychosis. In terms of belief in God, there are two kinds of Americans. One, people who go to church and pray are pretending to still believe in God. Two, The rest of us aren't even pretending anymore. The word God is a cliche word that people have been reiterating for generations without 1/10 of a second's thought as to what the word might mean. They don't need to know what it means. All they need is to mindlessly reiterate it to help them pretend. There is no such thing as an atheist because no one believes in God in the first place. Conservatives lie about believing in God. Liberals lie about believing in man. Tolerance for other religions. You can have tolerance for other religions to the degree that you lack belief in your own religion. This is what's going on in the clash between what is left of the Muslim world and the West. Satellite TV, the internet, pictures of what life is like in the West. This has given many Muslims pleasurable alternatives to belief in God. Exposure to Western ideas has given them scientific justification to view traditional religious orientations as inadequate to answer the essential questions of the meaning and purpose of human life. So they just avoid thinking about the problem and latch onto American and European distraction devices, which can include cell phones, computers, cars, food, guns, promiscuity, and licentious sex, and conspicuous consumption of anything and everything. The Muslims who fear the most of tuning into the West are the fundamentalists who are killing us. They lost their belief and/or religious practice far more slowly than we Europeans have lost ours. So they were still far less tolerant of other religions for far longer than we. Religious fundamentalism is not a sign of a strengthening faith. It is a sign that you are losing your religion. Fundamentalism is not a sign that religious belief is increasing or getting stronger. It's a sign that people are losing their religion, that the once faithful are losing their faith. Fundamentalism is a sign of loss of religion, not gain. We can witness this in the Muslim world. Many religious cultures around the world and throughout history refuse to help or pity the misfortunate among them, such as the blind, crippled, diseased, or poor, as a matter of course. Often they would actually treat such people with added contempt and even vicious and unnecessary cruelty. Why? Because such cultures believe that anybody suffering from any of the above are not just suffering, they're actually being punished by God. And helping such people might result in also being punished by God, and you also being punished by God. This is what one form of honest belief in God might look like. Christianity has built-in factors that require sympathy for the unfortunate, but oftentimes they were worse. In other words, they treated unfortunate people even worse. Once they got satellite TV, internet, and other forms of access to accurately see what life is like in advanced societies like the West, that is when fundamentalism got serious in the Muslim world. The healthier ones got less religious and more scientific, materialistic, and hedonism. The sicker ones became more devout Muslims and started attacking us. Don't get the wrong idea. Their main motivation for going to war against the Western world is because we are invading their countries, killing their children daily, and forcing them to sell us their natural resources against their will, taking away their choice. The fundamentalism gave them the justification and the motivation to start blowing people up. 9/11 was not immoral or illegal. 9/11 was not immoral or evil. 9/11 was the inevitable consequence of empire, as is all of the Western terrorism we are witnessing today. I didn't steal that pencil. Defendant, I didn't steal that pencil. Judge, then how did it get in your pocket? Defendant, I swear I didn't put it there, but I think I know how it got there. Judge, how then? Defendant, just before the pencil appeared in my pocket. Just before I felt the pencil in my pocket, I saw a flash of light and a hazy image of an angel of God dancing in the corner of my left eye. The angel reached into my pocket, and at that exact moment, I felt the pencil in my pocket. That's how the pencil got into my pocket. It was put there by God, so I didn't steal it. The bailiff, the clerk, the two attorneys of record, and the two cops in the courtroom all look at each other with half grins and bewilderment on their faces. Judge, bailiff, transfer this defendant to the mental health court forthwith for evaluation. The judge makes this ruling with a plaque hanging on the wall above his head, which reads, "In God we trust." Proof that nobody in that courtroom believed in God. It's not just that nobody in that courtroom took his answer seriously, either because they thought he was nuts or they thought he was not nuts but trying to be sly or whatever. The fact is that nobody in that courtroom took the defendant's answer seriously for a fraction of a second, because nobody in that courtroom took the idea that there might be any kind of God at all seriously, even for a fraction of a second, and that he might interact with his believers directly, as he is supposed to have done in biblical times via what we call miracles. Parentheses. Actually, there was a little old lady sitting in the back of the courtroom who does believe in God's angels on missions in America. But she didn't believe the defendant because she believes that God would only send her one of his angels to speak to her because she's more special than the defendant. The idea that God exists, that he interacts with humans here on earth, that there are angels, and God sends them on missions here on earth, is a notion that people in the country have left behind long ago, even if they say they still believe and they still go to church every Sunday. But the point is that if they say they believe in Methodism, if they say they believe in Sunni Islam, if they say they believe in Russian Orthodox Christianity or Catholicism or Baptists, any of these people, Jews, if they say they believe in this stuff, they have to, part of that belief system, part of that religion is believing in things like miracles. So if they know that, I mean, they're scientifically advanced enough to know that miracles don't happen, and they were written into the Bible as wisdom literature to give us a guide to think, well, what if this happened? How would I act? As moral reference points or signposts. So if you don't believe in those things anymore, you don't really believe in that concept of God anymore. You might have some watered down, like eroded concept of God that's been acidified. I mean, somebody took a statue of God. You know, somebody took that picture of God in the Sistine Chapel and Michelangelo had made a sculpture, exact replica of the picture in 4 dimensions sculpture. And they just discovered it buried somewhere. They knew the sculpture that artists, scholars of Italian Renaissance art have just discovered. And then they took hydrochloric acid and just slowly poured it over it until it melted. You don't exist except as an illusion in the mind of God. But since God doesn't exist either, you aren't even that. Design the religion to fit the neurosis, I always say. No one in the society, nor in this entire civilization, believes in God, and people in the third world are waiting impatiently for their chance to stop believing in God, too. I've developed a series of clandestine Socratic dialogue-style tests to demonstrate to people that they don't even know what they mean when they talk about God in the first place. I know these tests are valid and reliable by the violent reactions and personal physical attacks that have occurred when I get to the point when these people have been tricked into recognizing that they don't really believe in God. Provide examples of some of these tests. This is unknown to me. Provide examples of some of these tests and give examples of anecdotal interactions with my unknowing atheists, people who don't even know they're atheists until interrogated by me. Definition of morality. A moral value is something you would be willing to kill for or something you would be willing to die for. It is something you would be willing to sacrifice one or all of your children for. Different cultures evolve different moral values, but they aren't real values unless they rise in importance above everything in their lives, including especially their lives. Think of the story of Abraham and Isaac. In Abraham's time and place, in Abraham's culture, the ultimate moral value was obedience, as in obedience to God. Our ultimate value in this country is supposed to be freedom. And above that, you could probably say happiness. Back then, it was obedience. When God told Abraham to kill Isaac, he was ready to obey God. If you're not willing to kill or die for what you call your morality, then you have no morality. What you call your morality is nothing more than plastic bullshit. It's time to rename Christmas. Christmas has nothing to do with Christianity, and Christianity has never had anything whatsoever to do with Christ. Isn't it time we stopped insulting this poor crucified person by dragging his name into our yearly abomination of kitsch religion? People don't want happiness, people want purpose. There's an epigraph for this slide. Quote, if we possess our why of life, we can put up with almost any how. Man does not strive after happiness. Man does not strive after happiness. Only the Englishman does that. That's a quote from Twilight of the Idols. People don't want happiness. They don't need happiness. People want purpose. They need it more than they need food. Americans have lost all sense of purpose because they believe in nothing. Americans lack purpose because they have lost all meaning. Life without principle is how Thoreau would describe people today. The meaning of something becomes sacred when it becomes above and beyond ourselves. Americans lack any meaning or purpose because they are no longer strong enough to believe in anything sacred, which is not to imply that they ever were to begin with. The pursuit of happiness is a lost cause. It was a great misguided error that turned into a program for disaster. Most of the purposes people pursue today are self-destructive, but worst of all, they are world-destructive. What would you be willing to kill your children for, like the biblical Abraham was willing to kill Isaac, because he believed obedience to God was of more value than his child's happiness or life even? You're not willing to kill people for what you believe in, then you're just blowing wind. You're just passing gas through your mouth hole instead of through your asshole. The world today is full of posers and liars who want to believe they believe in something, but would never go through what it takes to actually believe in what they believe in. Just look at all the people who walk around wearing Che Guevara t-shirts. They wear Che Guevara t-shirts because they are not Che Guevara, meaning they're nothing like Che Guevara, meaning they aren't courageous and they wouldn't fight for other people's rights in the jungle, living in the jungle off the land, suffering, deprived. They don't have the cojones to do that. If they were Che Guevara, they would be out doing Che Guevara things instead of hanging out at a party wearing the Che Guevara t-shirt. How many of these posers do you think would be willing to struggle and fight in the mountains like he did? Not many. People don't want happiness. People want and need purpose. This has become a purposeless society. When people have purpose, they can endure. I mean, the fact that we're a purposeless society in the grander sense of purpose. This is exactly why the government and people are tuning more blindly into pursuing the American interest. Now, they should be doing that, but they're doing it in a blind style. The way they're doing it is tuning out anything else, because anything else is scary to them. It might defeat their purpose, quote unquote. And the way people, especially these corporate CEOs, they're just like, they're robotic suits, who sit there and make, like $227 million in salary one year, and each year it like doubles or triples. And they buy these retarded kitsch houses and yachts, and deep down inside, they don't get any satisfaction or pleasure from them. They really don't. I know they don't. People don't want happiness. Okay, so people are punishing themselves in society. Where was I? I'm sorry. Okay. People don't want happiness. People want and need purpose. This has become a purposeless society. When people have purpose, they can endure and overcome the most severely traumatizing suffering and pain with ease. To possess such a sense of purpose is the only way a human being can respect himself. When people lack a purpose for their existence, their hatred will become such a powerful force that it will break out of each individual brain and boil over into the surrounding environment. We see this happening every day with the effects of the war we're waging against Mother Nature herself, the visible existential effects being global warming, mountaintop removal, etc., etc. They are a direct result of human beings taking their hatred for themselves and each other and projecting it outward and aiming it at whatever they find in the path of their destruction. People are punishing themselves in this society for their own lack of the ability to believe in anything. This is one aspect of the phenomenon operating today, which I refer to as American lostness. Fucking damn it. Yeah, I know. Sorry. Nothing will compensate you for wasting the dawn. Jim Morrison and the Doors. It's a lyric from a song by the Doors. End of slideshow.